Hello and welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from a honest, realistic perspective. I'm your host Derek, and this is episode 111. This is the Week 11 preview episode where the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Pittsburgh Steelers at Acrisure Stadium. This is going to be a very pivotal game for both teams, another divisional AFC North matchup, and a lot is at stake for the Bengals in this game. Not only because their season, if they get to 7 losses, it's not technically over, but then they've got the New England Patriots coming in next week who are at the top of the conference. That's looking like a very difficult win at this point. So if they're going to be able to win the AFC North, they're going to have to sweep the Steelers and hope to sweep the Browns at the end of the season, and then can't overlook the Ravens in the upcoming week. But this game, like I said, can't get ahead of ourselves. One game at a time, all that's, cliche stuff. But if this season is going to not be completely lost, it's trending in the wrong direction. They've lost 6 out of the last 7 games. The only win that they had in those 7 games was that Thursday night game against these Steelers. And that gives you a little bit of hope that, hey, the Steelers couldn't beat the Bengals before. What makes us so sure that the Steelers are going to win? Now, this time it's going to be in Pittsburgh instead of in Cincinnati. And it's not going to be on a short week. But the Bengals are coming off a bye week, and that could be good or bad. The Bengals aren't especially great over the last 10 years coming off the bye. They're 4-6 in their last 10 games immediately after the bye. Zac Taylor's 3-3 in his career after the bye. But hopefully that at least gives Joe Flacco a little bit more comfortability, familiarity in the offense so that there won't be quite so many plays where he's maybe a little bit confused about what to do, or is it, how the blocking schemes, the finer points of the offense should be clicking with Joe Flacco a little bit better. And it's so strange to me how after the big story at the beginning of the week on Monday when Joe Burrow was back, and it was weird that they were having a major announcement on Monday. Bengals don't typically practice on Mondays, but they got a little light session in because they were coming off of that bye week. Maybe get a little bit of extra refreshing on whatever. But we saw the big story of Joe Burrow talking to the media about how he's aiming to come back around Thanksgiving, that Ravens game. So then a lot of the questions for Joe Flacco were about what's it like knowing that you're going to get benched pretty soon as as Joe Burrow comes back. And what do you think about that? And it's so strange. Joe Flacco said he's not really thinking about it because he's not worried about somebody taking his job. He's just, here to win this game against the Steelers. And the reality, I think if Joe Flacco won the next 2 games against the Steelers and the Patriots, even if Joe Burrow wanted to come back for Thanksgiving, it's like, well, if Joe Flacco was able to come, pull off some kind of a miracle and win these next 2 games, and the offense continues to look as good as it's looked over the past few games with Joe Flacco, where the offense for the Bengals is basically one of the best, most effective offenses in the NFL. Why would you want to suddenly replace Joe Flacco with Joe Burrow? Obviously, the fans want Joe Burrow because he's the face of the franchise. It feels like if you go to a Bengals game, 75% of the fans in the stands are wearing Joe Burrow jerseys. It's understandable why they would want him to play. And there's this perception that he's way better than Joe Flacco somehow. But like Joe Flacco has said, it's amazing how well you can play when you've got receivers like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, 2 of the highest paid receivers in the NFL, and for good reason. It's because they're really good So maybe Joe Flacco wasn't as bad. It's like nobody gives Joe Flacco any credit in this situation. He's playing his balls off, and everybody's so quick to say, well, as soon as they get rid of Joe Flacco and get Joe Burrow back in there, they'll be winning games again. It's like, wait a minute. Joe Flacco is doing everything he can to win games. So why would you? To me, it seems like a bit premature to assume they should just push Joe Flacco out the door if he's winning football games. Now, if he's losing games, completely different story. Obviously, you want Joe Burrow to come back as quickly as possible if Joe Flacco continues to lose, and if he does it in a way that is helped by this Bengals defense in some way. Like if they can just get a stop, get some turnovers, help out this Bengals offense in any way, they could probably win some of these games. But the other thing, this is a sidetrack. You hear a lot of people talk about the last two games and how devastating the losses were. And I don't disagree. These last two losses were very devastating as Bengals fans. We had the Jets game where the Jets came in at 0-7, ran the ball all over the Bengals, and had a miraculous fourth quarter where they scored 23 points, including two two-point conversions, and beat the Bengals remarkably with that last-second Breece Hall throw over DJ Turner in the back of the end zone to Mason Taylor. As if that weren't bad enough, then they had another home loss. Now, that's the thing is, I think maybe it's because these losses are coming at home in Cincinnati that fans are reacting so much worse than the games where they were in Minnesota losing to the Vikings or in Denver losing to the Broncos, where they got the margin of defeat was much greater in those games, but they were away. So maybe somehow playing away from home makes it easier for Bengals fans to accept these like horrible beatdowns. But these games that they were losing at home, the outcome was not good, but they were at least close, entertaining football games. Anyway, my point was, it's very easy for people to say in the optimistic camp of, oh, well, if the Bengals had won these past two games, instead of being 3-6, they'd be 5-4. They'd be tied with the Steelers, and they'd be at the top of the division. And wouldn't that be great? You could also look at it from the less optimistic perspective and consider they could have just as easily lost really all of the games that they've won so far this season. They could very easily be 0-9 at this point, and people would be like, oh my God, can you believe how bad the Bengals are? Like that game against the Browns week 1, if the kicker makes the field goal, Browns win. So you automatically put them at 2-7 right there. That's an easy if and but. And week 2, that defensive pass interference penalty on 4th and whatever it was, 4th and long against Travis Hunter. If the referee doesn't make the decision to throw that penalty and bail the Bengals out on 4th down, Bengals lose that game. And then they're, 1-8. And then the game against the Steelers that they won, that was a remarkable drive at the end to set up the last-second field goal. But a lot of things could have gone, easily. It was, it was a 2-point win for the Bengals in that one. So it wasn't guaranteed. Anything could have happened. Steelers could have got a interception on that play or something. Who knows? Anything could have, or Evan McPherson could have missed the kick. Let's say Evan McPherson misses the kick. Browns kicker makes his kick. 3 plays go in the opposite direction. Bengals are 0-9. So it's easy to say, oh, Bengals, if they would have, made the tackle against the Bears and whatever. Yes, that's true. It also could have gone the opposite direction. But the Bengals are 3-6. Like they say, you are what your record says you are. The Bengals are a 3-6 football team that is teetering on the brink. And although the optimism shot in the arm of having Joe Burrow back at practice might help with the morale around the locker room and within the fan base, I think it's, like I said, easy for fans to forget everything that happened the entire course of the season after that bye week. There's a lot of things going on in the world, geopolitically, globally, domestically, all kinds of stuff. And football is just a distraction. I know people aren't living and dying by every single Bengals game the way that I am, but it's easy to forget that guy, Logan Wilson, who was the team captain that the Bengals traded away for a 7th-round pick to the Cowboys before the trade deadline or the last day of the trade deadline. They didn't get any new linebackers, so the Bengals defense, that's not true. They signed some free agents. They got some guys on the practice squad, but those guys were, like they say, free agents for a reason. No, the 31 other NFL teams didn't want to sign these guys. There's no reason to necessarily think they're going to be the next Hall of Famers, but you never know. These guys could do things remarkable. But what we've seen is the Bengals have committed to their 2 rookie linebackers, Demetrius Knight Jr. and Barrett Carter. Neither one have looked especially great. They've made plays few and far between. You can't say they haven't made any plays, but stopping the run, coverage and pass, blitzing has been mostly ineffective. I can't really think of too many plays where I've seen Demetrius Knight pressuring the quarterback. They put him in that kind of Jermaine Pratt role of being like the edge defender, like he's like a 3-4 outside linebacker, but Demetrius Knight is not able to set an edge effectively. He gets blocked way too easily by tight ends, receivers, offensive tackles, guards. It doesn't matter. And yeah, he's often too slow and out of position. Barrett Carter, we've seen him since he's taken over for Logan Wilson, miss a ton of tackles. Bengals safeties have not played very well. Jordan Battle and Geno Stone, they started off the season strong with a bunch of interceptions, and they were part of the reason that the Bengals won those first 2 games. Those tip passes and fortunate interceptions that the Bengals were able to generate, haven't had too many of those. And the Bengals and the Steelers both have 8 interceptions, but the Bengals' turnover margin is, let me check the stats. Bengals are -5 total turnover differential. Steelers are +6. That makes the Steelers 4th in the league and the Bengals 26th. And that's one of the old adages, whoever wins the turnover margin usually wins the game. That just shows you how many fumbles the Bengals had and maybe how many fumbles the Steelers defense has created on the other side. But if we look at kind of the tail of the tape between these 2 teams, we know it was mostly even in that last matchup. Not a lot of defense by either. It was 33-31, and that was the best rushing game that the Steelers have had so far this season. They've not been very effective on the ground. And overall, it's kind of a weird matchup because the Steelers have the 29th overall offense in terms of yards gained. They're 30th in rushing, 23rd in passing, but they're 16th in scoring. So even though they're kind of down at the bottom in terms of yards, they're pretty good at scoring. But the Bengals defense, as we know, last in the league in almost every category. Yards allowed, rushing yards allowed, scoring, they're last in the league, giving up the most points of anybody. Over 33 points per game. And Aaron Rodgers is coming off one of his worst games, if not the worst game he's had this season against the Chargers. He just looked old. He looked like he didn't want to get hit, and he was kind of just dodging out of the way a lot of times and not being very mobile. So theoretically, if the Bengals did have a competent pass rush, they should be able to put pressure on Aaron Rodgers and make him uncomfortable and force inaccurate throws. Unfortunately for the Bengals, they're going to be missing their primary pass rushing threat in Trey Hendrickson. He's going to miss another game due to that hip back. Now it's listed as a pelvis injury. It's like shifting around all this injury. I don't know what it is. They haven't really specified if it's a muscle thing or what's going on with Trey Hendrickson, but he's going to be out. He was doubtful on Monday, so that's how you knew he wasn't going to play in this game. If you're doubtful on Monday, and then on top of that, Shamar Stewart, the Bengals' first-round draft pick, who has already missed a couple games with an ankle injury he suffered in week 2, he's going to be missing several weeks, it sounds like, with a knee injury. He also did not practice this week, and he's listed as week to week by Zac Taylor, so who knows how long that is going to last. But the Bengals' top two, Shamar Stewart hasn't really done much of anything when he has been out there. He hasn't looked especially great, which is disappointing because even he was talking a lot of stuff about how, when they drafted him, I remember the interview. He had a lot of attitude. He was talking about how the other teams that passed on him, that didn't draft him, were going to regret it and all this stuff, and that sounded great. And then so far, he hasn't really done much of anything. He's got like 2 solo tackles and a handful of assists, but he doesn't have any sacks. He's not forcing a lot of pressures. He's been around the quarterback a few times, but Aaron Rodgers even faked him out. The first game they played, he couldn't even bring down literally the oldest player in the NFL, Shamar Stewart, got faked out by. So defensively for the Bengals, I expect the Steelers to try to run against this Bengals lackluster defensive line, but really the whole defense is lackluster when it comes to stopping the run. Now, the Steelers don't have a huge power running game. Jaylen Warren is a good running back, but he's kind of like a Chase Brown. He's not like a huge power back. And then Kenneth Gainwell is kind of like the third down, smaller receiving option out of the backfield. But the Steelers do have those massive tight ends to throw to and to help in the running game. The Steelers might go 6 offensive linemen plus Darnell Washington as the 7th offensive lineman and just run it on the Bengals defense. Bengals defensive line up front with Joseph Osai and Miles Murphy is going to likely be starting at defensive end. And then TJ Slayton and BJ Hill holding on the interior. They're going to have their work cut out for them. It looks like the Steelers might get their guard back. I think Isaac Suomalo is going to be coming back, or he's questionable for this game. But not only the Bengals defense is what I think is going to make the Steelers want to run the ball, but also on top of that, the field conditions are going to be something to watch. So earlier, I forget what week it was, but there was a game maybe about 5 or 6 weeks ago where there was a lot of scrutiny on the playing surface. And the Pitt Panthers, the college team, also play in this stadium. And this weekend, Notre Dame plays at Pittsburgh, at Pitt. They're going to play on this field. And then the Bengals and play the Steelers on the same field basically the next day, 25 hours later. And they've resodded the area between the numbers, basically the middle of the field. So it's hopefully the sod is good and it is, it holds up well in that Saturday game, but it's obviously not going to be as pristine as it could have been if there weren't a Division I football game happening the previous day. There's going to obviously be some chunks taken out of the field over the course of that game, no matter how great the sod job is. So given that field is going to be a little bit softer, probably a little bit slower in terms of, you're not going to have quite as much top-end speed ability on a field that's a little bit rough And that may lend itself more to the running game than it would a high-flying passing attack. Bengals offensively, I don't think it really matters too much because T. Higgins and Jamar Chase should be able to work with that. But if the timing, the precision isn't quite there, the Bengals might have to try to get something going in the running game. And the Bengals haven't been effective necessarily running the football, even though overall they're 22nd. They're last in the NFL rushing the football, 13th passing, 13th scoring. So even better than the Steelers in terms of scoring, but the one thing they can't do is run the football. The Steelers defensively are 28th overall in yards allowed, but they're 14th in stopping the run, 32nd, last in the NFL in passing yards allowed. So this is a good matchup on paper for the Bengals. Bengals love to throw. They're the pass-happiest team in the NFL, and the Steelers are worst at defending against the pass, and they're 20th in scoring defense. The Steelers' defense is going to look a little bit different than the last time the Bengals played them. Last time, the Steelers' defense, it was weird. They let Joe Flacco throw 23 times to Jamar Chase, completed 16 of them, and I think he only had only 160 yards. But I don't think the Steelers are going to let Jamar Chase get 23 targets. And the Steelers defensively are going to look a lot different because they don't have Darius Slay at cornerback. He's out with a concussion. They also moved Jalen Ramsey from nickel cornerback to free safety. He's full-time safety, partly due to injuries at the safeties for the Steelers, but also because Jalen Ramsey was not looking very good at cornerback, especially when he's trying to guard guys like Jamar Chase. And at this point in his career, that's a move you see a lot of highly touted cornerbacks like Charles Woodson and who else am I thinking of? Not Ed Reed. He already played. Not Ronnie Lott. Did he play at cornerback? Did Dion? I can't remember if Dion ever played any free safety near the end of his career when he was with the Ravens. Darrelle Revis, I think he might have switched. Antonio Cromartie might have switched from corner to safety. There's one it's like at the tip of my tongue. I can't think of off the top of my head. Okay, I had to look it up. The other one is Rod Woodson. So Charles Woodson, Rod Woodson. I got Ronnie Lott right, actually. Another one, D'Angelo Hall. I don't think Dion ever moved to safety or Ed Reed, but there are a number of players who have made the transition just because they don't necessarily have that high-end change of direction, top-end speed that they might have had in their younger years. But moving to safety, they still have the football instincts to get to the football, make tackles, come up in the running game, all that kind of thing. So the Steelers' defensive backfield is going to look totally different on Sunday. One of the other things that's going to be interesting to watch is the Steelers signed a free agent this week, Asante Samuel Jr. I think maybe it was this week. Brought him in. He was one of the top free agents this offseason, but he went on injured reserve because of some kind of a neck stinger nerve issue in his neck and shoulder. So he had spinal fusion surgery by one of the doctors for the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. So he is obviously going to give his stamp of approval if he did the surgery on this guy. But Asante Samuel was one of the top rookie cornerbacks when he came out in the same draft class out of Florida State in 2021 with Jamar Chase. And he was with the Chargers originally, but then was since released after going on to the injured reserve at end of last season. So he's kind of been in limbo without a team, signed with the Chargers after making the rounds, going to a few other teams. I don't know if I would be surprised or not, because the Steelers, they don't have a ton of depth at cornerback after Darius Slay goes out. They moved Jalen Ramsey to safety. They signed Asante Samuel for a reason, but he's on the practice squad right now. They could call him up to the active roster at any point. And if he's in shape, that's probably something I can't really estimate, is how good of football shape is a guy who hasn't played, in the past several months. He said he was working out at the track and, doing all kinds of weightlifting, but that doesn't get you into football shape, obviously, which could be either good or bad. That could mean he's got fresh legs, he's coming in, he's ready to go, or that could mean he's not quite got the stamina for a full NFL game. But based on the way that the Steelers have been playing against the pass, if he's able to make high-end plays like he was, a few years ago, I wouldn't be totally shocked if they bring him in for this game against the Bengals to try to guard against these elite receivers that the Bengals have. Offensively, Joe Flacco is going to play in this game. Joe Burrow is not playing for sure. He's still on injured reserve. He's not ready to come back yet. Joe Flacco, they didn't make too much of a big deal about his shoulder injury, but he hasn't been practicing except for Thursdays. Basically, sounds like the plan is for him to just practice one day a week with the starters so they can get the timing and everything they want to do with the new plays that they've got installed they want to work on for that week. Otherwise, he's mostly just saving his body for game day. And like I said, he's going to have to continue to get those pain-killing shots in his shoulder. Hopefully, he is able to play through the pain, because we definitely don't want to see Jake Browning back out there. I would be interested to see if they put Sean Clifford in the backup role instead of Jake Browning at any point, but he's probably going to be the emergency third quarterback. Samaje Perine is going to miss this game at least. They haven't put him on injured reserve, but he's got sounds like a high ankle sprain he suffered in that kick return early in the game against the Browns. The player who tackled him, I forget his name, but the player who tackled Samaje Perine on that was fined by the NFL for that tackle for a illegal hip drop move. It wasn't a flag for whatever reason. I know it's hard to see that kind of thing, but he obviously got bent up in an awkward position when it happened. That may mean that rookie Taj Brooks, the 6th-round pick out of Texas Tech, may get a little bit more action. We saw the Bengals aren't afraid to go with one running back the entire game, and Chase Brown can do it. He can carry the workload. He can be an every down back. But he's going to need the occasional break. He probably won't play every snap on offense, so they're going to have Taj Brooks. They may call somebody up off the practice squad, another running back, because Taj Brooks also does kick returns and special teams. If he's going to have to play more of a role on the offense with Samaje Perine out, this could, in theory, maybe Jermaine Burton could contribute on special teams, but he most likely won't because he missed practice this week with an illness of some unspecified manner. We still have not seen the debut of Jermaine Burton. And while I'm thinking of it, players who haven't been playing a lot in that rookie class, the other 3rd-round pick, McKinley Jackson, who is the defensive tackle, went to school with Shamar Stewart at Texas A&M. But when I went back and watched the mic'd up, they had the video of Jamar Chase in that game against the Bears. They had the camera on Jamar Chase on the sidelines when Colston Loveland was catching the game-winning touchdown from Caleb Williams, and all the Bears fans in Paycor Stadium were going crazy. They had a camera on the sidelines, and they showed there was one Bengals player who had his helmet in his hands, and as Colston Loveland is running for the touchdown, McKinley Jackson takes his helmet and spikes it into the ground. And the thing that was crazy about that is when you went back and looked at the official game statistics, McKinley Jackson did not play a single snap in that game. So he was throwing his helmet, despite the fact that he didn't play even one play in the game. But he was upset, maybe because he felt like if he would have played, he would have made that tackle. I don't know what McKinley Jackson was throwing his helmet about, but it was just crazy to see. He was like the only one, reacting that way. It's like, why are you freaking out, dude? You didn't even play. But it was just odd because also McKinley Jackson had requested a trade. I think like that week or earlier, maybe a week before that, like he had requested to be released or traded, and then they show him on the sidelines throwing his helmet. It was just crazy. But who knows? He might play in this game. McKinley Jackson, why not? Put him in there. You got nothing to lose at this point. Well, that's not true. They could probably lose more. But just, I would rather see McKinley Jackson than Howard Cross. That's all I want. But Samaje Perine, he's going to be out. The tight ends for the Bengals are looking healthy. Noah Fant and Tanner Hudson. We haven't seen the return of Mike Gesicki. He's still on injured reserve. He's not going to be coming back yet. Bengals offensive line, though, is mostly healthy. I don't think Dalton Reisner was on the injury report this week, so he had an illness he was dealing with. He should be back in case they need him. Now, Lucas Patrick is questionable for this game with a calf injury, but he probably wasn't going to be playing anyway. They're sticking with the rookies at guard. They're going to have Dylan Fairchild at left guard, Jalen Rivers at right guard. And defensively, the Steelers are dealing with a couple more injuries. They've got Alex Highsmith, their top outside linebacker on the offensive left, opposite of TJ Watt. He's going to be out. I think he's got a pectoral injury. I mentioned Darius Slay, concussion on that cornerback for the Steelers. Isaac Suamalo questionable for this game. But both teams are dealing with injuries, as you would expect at this point in the season. But the other thing to watch in this game is going to be obviously the special teams. Chris Boswell, the Steelers kicker, is one of the best every year in the NFL. Evan McPherson had a good rookie season. Since then, it's been a little bit inconsistent. He's dealt with injuries last season. This year, he went back to his old form. Now, if they could just get the kicking ball that Evan McPherson requires, apparently, to be able to kick a decent field goal, they might have something. But we don't want to settle for field goals. Bengals need to be scoring touchdowns. The one thing we haven't seen out of Jamar Chase this season is a bunch of touchdowns. He's leading the NFL in receptions, and he's up near the top in yards, but he's like 15th or 16th in touchdowns. I think he only's got 5 so far this season. That's the one thing they haven't been able to break him out deep. Joe Flacco and T. Higgins have had a connection, but maybe teams are so committed to doubling Jamar Chase with safety help over the top that leaves T. Higgins and Mitch Tinsley and Andre Yosivach and other guys open, but not Jamar Chase. But it's so funny for me to take a sampling of some of the Steelers media, because if you replace Steelers with Bengals, they sound almost identical in the way that the media covers their respective football teams. The Bengals, everything's horrible. They need to fire everybody. Or I guess, that's kind of mellowed out in the bye week, and everybody just remembers the good times and the touchdowns of Joe Flacco, and Joe Burrow is coming back, so they're feeling good this week. But for the most part, it's been kind of negative coverage on the Bengals. And same thing with the Steelers, though. Like, the Steelers are leading the AFC North division. They've got a winning record, and people are talking about they need to fire the coach. Fire Mike Tomlin. Fire this guy. Fire that guy. Cut this guy. They get rid of that guy. It doesn't matter what team, unless you're like the Patriots and you went from worst to first, you're all of a sudden leading the conference. Everybody else, I bet you there's probably, I detest the Kansas City Chiefs, so I haven't forced myself to listen to anything related to the Kansas City Chiefs. But I'm sure at this point, the Chiefs are also 5-4. There's people probably talking about, do they need to get rid of Patrick Mahomes and fire Andy Reid and do all that kind of stuff? there's probably crazy people out there who are like that. But people love to complain, I guess. People love to criticize, and I'm no different. I'm not a fan of the Bengals coaching staff or the drafts that they've had or the free agent signings that they've had the past several years, but it seems pretty obvious that the Bengals just aren't really very good at what they've been doing. But they are good at making money, and my friend got an invitation to sign up for like the new club level seating at Paycor Stadium. They've got the 200 level. They're expanding it out so they can have even more seats. But he said they were all like corner of the end zone, like not where you want to be sitting for an NFL football game. You don't want to sit in the end zone or in the corners. That's absolutely the worst because you can't tell what's going on. But they said they were like $3,000 a seat for the season. Like, I mean, you know, we've got millions of people out here on SNAP and EBT, nutrition assistance, and the Bengals are trying to charge $3,000 a year. Think about how many families that could feed it, or, you know, go to the Bengals game. Either one. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty if you've got season tickets. Good for you. You've got more means than a lot of people, so congratulations. I will continue to be watching this Bengals game from the comfort and economy of my own living room. And this is gonna be a CBS game with Kevin Harlan, Trent Green, and Melanie Collins on this call. It's going to be hopefully a good game for Kevin Harlan to be calling the Bengals games. They seem to lose those games that Kevin Harlan calls. I think he called the Packers game. I think they lost that game. There's so many like Ravens games. I can just imagine Lamar Jackson doing spin moves and running past Bengals, and Kevin Harlan is the soundtrack to so many of those amazing Lamar Jackson stiff-arming Sam Hubbard, threw him away like a rag doll, you know. He did have a good call. I think it was Jamar Chase's rookie season. Jamar Chase had that catch from Joe Burrow on the touchdown on the fade on the left side of the end zone where he hit that extra gear and caught like the back half of the football right before he ran into the back of the end zone. Kevin Harlan was calling that one. That was pretty cool. There's been some moments, but I love any game that Kevin Harlan is calling because he's one of the best in the business. Steelers are actually favored by 5.5 by the odds makers. For this one, it's going to be, you know, home field advantage, you could say, for the Steelers. And on paper, they should beat the Bengals, but anything could happen. Although, again, with this Bengals defense, it's hard to imagine them beating anyone. Like, they just can't stop anyone. But maybe the Steelers can stop themselves. Maybe they'll commit some penalties, they'll fumble. I don't know. Anything could happen. You never know. I'm just not feeling optimistic. I feel like it's going to be a loss. I don't want to predict, but, you know, if I had to make a prediction, I would say 37-31 Steelers. Let's go with that. 37-31 Steelers cover. Not that I'm going to bet on this, but Steelers cover the 5.5. Bengals go to 3-7 is my guess. But we'll break it all down on the next episode and find out, along with everybody else, what happens. So thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, thumbs up, do all the stuff. And I'm going to leave you with a hoo day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.